Word Radio on demand, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live at wordradio.com.
I told y'all we were going to the Bahamas, but we had to take a little segment in order to get on the plane and fly. But I think we've arrived. We're gonna find out. I should be on the Skype line with my brother Chris Davis out of the Bahamas. If that is the case, let me hear from you, my brother.
Yes, brother. Uhuru, Eboru, Aboya, peace be with you. All African greetings sending your way.
Oh man, it took a lot to make this happen, so I want to apologize for any confusion, but I'm just glad. You got Sister Quace in the background literally shedding a tear. She's so happy that that this has worked out right now.
Yes, I hope that I'll be able to fulfill her expectations, you know.
And, brother, you must have made an impression on her, because she came back and she definitely wanted to do all in her power to make sure we had a chance to have, you know, the beginning of what hopefully is a long-term set of conversations. So shout out to Quasa, Eric, Kayla. It was a whole team back here sweating up a storm to get this connection. So let's jump right in then. What I want to do is, you know, I'll be starting a new show here called Groundings With Our Brothers. Groundings for me comes from a lot of different places, and I'll explain a lot of that to our listening audience. But one of the places it comes from for me is a title of a book by Walter Rodney called Groundings With My Brothers. And, you know, I know that there's a lot about groundation that they talk about in Jamaica with the Rasta brothers. So, you know, it's a deep term that I really want to use as a way of centering what my hope is for these types of dialogues, and that is that we begin to understand that diaspora has always been a part of how we see ourselves as African people, regardless of where we've been dispersed across the globe. And that if we're going to make ourselves whole again, we're going to have to do it through a reconnection, through a diasporic bonding, through diasporic grounding. So I'm looking forward to you, as you know, in this year that they call the new year 2020, being one of the first voices that really helps us begin that grounding process, my brother. So if you can, introduce yourself to our listening audience, letting them know a little bit about yourself and why you want to also be a part of this grounding process. I really want to give you a shout out and appreciate the flyer and the promotion work that you did with it, man. I really like it. I want to talk with you further about using that as we move forward. But just talk a little bit about why this dialogue and this opportunity is important to you.
Well, as you mentioned before, you know, I come from the Bahamas, right? We're a very small country, you know, and for those that visited, you know, Kwasa was here, a few others was here, and I open up all of my presentations and lessons, particularly for those who aren't from here. You know, the Bahamas is both the vanguard of neo-colonialism and colonial sentiments, but we are also the vanguard of African tradition, African culture. You understand? And so for me, it wasn't something that I ever purposefully even wanted to do. It's just something that my path in life kind of took me through too, right? Now, my ancestral lineage in the Bahamas is in a place called Cat Island, right? Y'all, you hear me still?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a place called Cat Island, and we all know about the famous actor Sidney Poitier, right? So this is where Sidney Poitier's roots is from, right? And growing up and being someone from here, to put it in oversimplified terms, Cat Island could be deemed as the, you know, the Haiti of the Bahamas, you know, the New Orleans of the Bahamas, you know, the Togo fetish market, as if you will. So when you ask somebody about this place, you know, we have so much to be proud of. You know, we have the music, the culture, the history, people like Sidney Poitier, Burt Williams, Al Roker, Roxanne Roker, you know, all these are people from little homestead island right there. But then on the side of it, you know, they'll come and they'll pull you on the side and whisper, now, you know, you got to be careful in Cat Island because, you know, they do that African witchcraft, voodoo and all. Yeah, right. So you catch my drift.
Yeah.
And I'm a guy who went to a pretty prominent private school. You know, I'm not one who was expected to take this path in life, but I've always been a victim of this sugar-coated, whitewash British apologist history.
Right.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as you walk around the Bahamas, you will see that our most prominent statues are Christopher Columbus and Queen Victoria. Another lesser known man known as Woods Rogers. And it's almost as if we suss out the worst examples for heroes to put on these pedestals.
Yeah.
In the Bahamas, I'm telling you, and in the Bahamas, as it stands today, West African religion is illegal.
Wow.
That's sinking, yeah. So we 95% black, but unlike Cuba, Haiti, even Barbados, we still holding on to many of these colonial laws, right?
So let me ask you for clarity then. You had made a statement earlier about seeing the Bahamas as the vanguard of African culture,
right.
And now talking about this idea of what's prohibited there. And you mentioned places like Cuba, Haiti, Brazil, because when people think about that in the islands and in the Caribbean, those are the places we think about as the vanguard. So give us some context about why the Bahamas. What is it about the Bahamas that you would assert it as the vanguard for West African and African culture?
Well, that's what I was getting to now, right? So at the same time, we have all of these stigmas and the demonization of West African culture, right? But at the same time, every Bahamian is a holistic healer, is a holistic African healer. You understand? So at one point, they would be in the church, and doing all these things, very dogmatic from a Christian standpoint. But at the same time, you come to a Bahamian and you say, yo, I feel like I getting a cold. We ain't taking to the pharmacy, bro. We can take you to our grandmother, we can take you in the bush, we can mix some poultice and all of these things. We are actually experts in the medicine field, you understand?
All right.
And even in our language, right? So obviously people could hear, even though I'm toning it down, you could hear my accent, right?
Right.
Now, when I meet people from the Carolinas, they tell me, oh, you sound like my grandfather.
Yeah.
And that is because of this historical cultural link. Who the majority of black Bahamians really are, we are the Gullah and the Geechee, okay? The Gullah and the Geechee, the Gullah and the Geechee corridor, Rice Country, all of these things. This is who we are. And we have retained and almost in a sense protected much of that culture that has been lost. You understand? So me, as a black Bahamian, I share kinship to people like Michelle Obama, people like the great athlete Jim Brown, Michael Jordan. But of course, you will never hear them bragging about their good Geechee roots.
Right,
you
right.
understand what I'm saying? So this is just something that, people have interests, people have hobbies, and people have passions. African history and African liberation is far more than that to me. It is an obsession. And it's my day and it's my walk in life.
That's right. That's
you
right.
Understand? And so the way I got into all of this, it's a very complex thing, and it is my life journey. But it was always this thing in the back of my head. Okay, I'm so proud to be a Kid Island, the son of Kid Island. But then at the same time, they turn around and tell us all of these bad things, right? And then in the Bahamas, we also have many negative stigmas overtly surrounding African tradition. You understand? We love to tout and praise and say, oh, we're a Christian nation. And between us and Jamaica, and I would probably say Uganda, we have more churches per capita than anywhere else in the world. But then at the same time, we also have the second oldest black separatist, black Baptist churches outside of Silver Bluff, Georgia. Okay? So I don't know if you're familiar with a guy by the name of George Lyle.
No.
Right? Now, George Lyle is a great unsung Bahamian, not just Bahamian, but African hero, you understand? And the Bahamas actually reveals many of these sorts. Now, George Lyle is one of the founders of the separatist Black Baptist Church, right? These were the ones that kind of didn't like what was going on with the European one, and they, we're not knocking anybody's belief, and they gravitated towards their own African form, right? It is very closely similar to what you see in Trinidad with the Shango Baptist.
Right, yeah.
Right? Now, this separatist Baptist church was founded in an area known as Silver Bluff in Georgia. Of course, we know that's Gullah Geechee country, right? More specifically on the Galphin Plantation. And this even is loosely kind of related to the Second Amendment, right? So during this American Revolution, the vast majority of us Bahamians are actually descended from people that left America after the American Revolution, okay? Now, of course, in high school, we got this kind of British apologist, whitewash, sugar-coated version where, where the loyalists came, they brought their slaves, they were kicked out of America. But really and truly, they turned the Bahamas into a full-fledged, slave society.
Right.
Okay? These people from the Galvin plantation, they took up Lord Dunmore on his proclamation. Remember, Lord Dunmore now said that if you black and you indigenous and you want to be free, escape from the plantation, fight for the British, we'll grant you your freedom.
Yes,
okay?
Exactly.
And so any of these black separatist people started to leave their plantation. This pretty much turned American slavery, particularly in the South, upside down. And this is one of the major reasons for the Second Amendment. They didn't have anything to do with any, and this is why I love Bahamian history, because it actually exposes many of the fallacies in other places. Because the whole Second Amendment argument is some innate rights to bear arms.
Right.
It just come out of the blue from left field.
Right.
We want to carry guns. No, it was about slaves and the institution of slavery being unstable, due largely in part to these separatist Black Baptist preachers. One who, in my opinion, the modern Black Baptist preacher could do a lot to learn from and try to follow, if you catch my drift.
Oh, yeah.
Now, these people came from the Galvin plantation to the Bahamas, and they settled in an area that was already established. They used to call it Negro Town. This is like a quasi-maroon society, if you catch my drift. Not really independent, but they kind of put us there in a kind of stratification mode. And then we kind of, as we do, we take lemons and we make lemonade, right? And so these people were then amalgamated into these communities. And then later on, you had liberated Africans. That I don't know if we're still doing the thing on Sunday, but I want to get more on that on Sunday. Now, these people came here, and you had people like Sambo Scriven, his wife Agar Scriven. Can't leave the sisters out, right?
Never.
You had Prince William, and you had Amos William. All of these had their wives with their families. Now, in the case of Sharper Morris and Sambo Scriven, these were two guys who had escaped slavery during the Revolution. And Sambo was 60 years old at the time. And he floated to the Bahamas on an open raft from St. Augustine. And he founded the Black Baptist Church and built the first Black Baptist churches outside of Silver Bluff, Georgia, right? Right here in the Bahamas. So Bethel Baptist, and then we have St. John's Native Baptist Church, both of which were around 1783, 1784. Officially, they were there at 1790. So all throughout Georgia and the Carolinas, you had these runaway ads looking for Sambo Scriven and Prince William. All the time, they in the Bahamas preaching. And to even add to that, when you had runaway ads in the Bahamas, now the Bahamas had more runaways per capita than many other people.
So, Brother Chris, what I want to do, we're on radio. So we come up on a commercial break. So I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I want you to continue the story, but also I want to do a reset for a little bit. I really want you to talk about, before you continue this, when people go to the Bahamas, when I hear about people, because I've never been, so when people tend to go, it's usually for kind of this touristy experience. If people are going to the Bahamas, how do they end up connecting with you and people like you who are doing this kind of history, this kind of information? If I were going to the Bahamas, how would I link to this type of a cultural experience when I get there? I'm on the phone with my brother Chris Davis. He's a Bahamian historian, interpreter, and activist, and he's kicking off our conversation, Groundings with Our Brother. Stay tuned. We'll talk with you after these messages.
Listen live at wordradio.com.
And welcome back to the Shamari Show, where we're having our first Groundings conversation with our brother out of the Bahamas, Chris Behanzin Davis. Am I saying that middle name correctly, sir?
Yeah, man, Behanzin. Well, it's an adopted one, one of my favorite anti-colonial African kings.
Okay.
He is from one of the last kings of the kingdom of Dahomey.
Oh, right? Wow. Yeah. Powerful. So what I want to do, I want you to talk a little bit about how people can connect with you or people like you who are doing this kind of cultural interpretation during a visit to the Bahamas, because most people I talk to, they go, they have fun, and they talk about the parties and the beaches and hanging out. I've not met anybody except Quasa who's come back and said, hey, I met this kind of brother down here and you should talk with him. So how would people link with this kind of version or this kind of interpretation of their experience in the Bahamas? Right.
Well, unfortunately, many of us who are of this mindset, I don't want to say that there's a concerted effort to block us, but there isn't as much enthusiasm with that. So sometimes it's a little different. And we've adopted this unfortunate attitude of us having to kind of sugarcoat and make our history more palatable for the visitor, right? So when you're talking about slavery, that's why you don't want to hear about these things. And typically when you go on a tour, you know, like I said, you have Christopher Columbus statue and Queen Victoria statue. Probably it's getting a little better now, but most of those tours, when you drive past Queen Victoria statue, they will tell you, oh, Queen Victoria freed the slaves. And you and I both know that's not true, right? Now, to connect with me, I'm usually stationed at the Pompeii Museum. It's a museum of slavery, emancipation, and modern day slavery, okay? I'm on Facebook, I'm on social media. We have a strong group of people here and activists who are pretty much on the front lines. We have my brother Anton Farrington L. You know, all of these guys are connected with me, and anyone who gets in contact with me, they could get with these people. But you have Anton Farrington L, and he's just recently been successful in opening the first Morris chapter, right? In the Bahamas. We have Anku Sarah, also known as Cleveland Aeneas III.
Okay.
He goes by Anku Sarah. He's a Cahoon, and he has the Coptic Church right there in the heart of Baintown. Wow. Baintown being the same area where those Black Baptist separatist churches are. As a matter of fact, he's directly descended from many of the heroes from the concept of the Saltwater Underground Railroad that we'll be speaking about on Sunday, right? So, and then you also have, and the corporation that I work for on my day job is called AMMC. You know, you also have, I'm just trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. You have Ian Mora, right? He has a project called Indaba, Rastafari Brethren. Oh, wow. We also have 3 Rasta camps on the island. You understand? So you have the what we call the Bobo camp, which is really the EABIC. You understand? Then you have the Nyabingi camp. Oh, yeah. And all of these are also in Black strongholds, right? And I don't want to give away too much before Sunday, but in this concept of the Saltwater Underground Railroad, we have villages that were specifically set up by us to house Africans from specific areas that were rescued from Portuguese slave ships, American slave ships, right? And so all of this adds to this big melting pot. So a lot of times people would be in the Bahamas. Like, for example, the reason why I could not get good Wi-Fi because I was at a museum called Balcony House, right? This is a good example of how we try to change the narrative or to suit the British narrative. Now, Balcony House is the oldest standing wooden residence built at that same period with the Loyalist migration. Now, they usually focus on this lady named Josephine Bryce, who was some rich tycoon from America, friends with Ernest Hemingway and that old chestnut, right? Now, the real guy who we should be talking about is a man by the name of Stephen Dillard. I like to call him the Frederick Douglass of the Bahamas, being the first Black politician. Now, even more importantly, Stephen Dillard is the grandfather of James Weldon Johnson. You understand? James Weldon Johnson is the author of the song that we all know and love to sing, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Right.
Right. So this is the Black national anthem. And so you could go to Balcony House, you could get that tour, and unless somebody like me there, you will not hear anything about his relation to James Weldon Johnson.
So I believe so it sounds like it has to be an intention on both sides. You all have crafted an intention to make this history known, and people who are coming, particularly Black people, but any people who are coming, have to want to find this history, and you all will find each other and make this a part of the groundings when people come to the Bahamas.
Exactly. But, you know, and I'm not, and like this, everybody knows me, you know, everybody knows Chris from Pompeii Museum. Pompeii Museum is where I'm at, 9 to 5. Even if I'm not here, you have another guy here by the name of Dion Sims. And he, you know, it's the same thing, you know, he knows all the history. I actually learn a lot that I know from him. You know? So we have a team. Now, one of the problems that has been in the Bahamas that I see globally between, say, the Black historian and the general public is this kind of ivory tower separation. You understand?
Yeah, that's why we're having these dialogues. We're trying to bring, like, even you have it here in the States too, where, you know, we've allowed this thing to happen where in order to be African centered. We've turned it into like this knowledge expedition, and you got to go on a college campus, or you got to pay money to listen to somebody's lecture. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm not knocking anybody's thing, but if we're really going to use it in the way that it's meant to use to really create groundings and diaspora and Pan-Africanism, we got to bring it to the people, and the people got to bring themselves to it. That's what we have to create, that bridge right there, or else none of this will matter.
My brother, you hit the nail right on the head. I actually get into it all the time with my counterparts. I say, this information is not for us to sit in a room and have intellectual masturbation. This information is for us to disseminate to the people so they could identify with it. There's no greater unifying factor between human beings than a history, and that gives you that common goal. We don't have to be holding hands, singing kumbaya, you understand?
Right.
But we have that respect, to borrow a saying from a son of the Philly soil. I'm sure you've heard of him, Dr. Umar Johnson.
Yeah.
Right? He has a simple moniker that means so much. African family first. It's very provocative too, because of course many people will misconstrue the meaning of that. But essentially what my perception of that means is we must put that unifying factor, which is African above all else, So I could be a Baptist, you could be a Rasta, you could have somebody trodden Ifa, you could have a Nuwabian, you could have a Hebrew Israelite, and we all could come on the same page politically and socially. You understand?
That's right.
And then maybe after we get all those things together, then we could have some nice debates about who is right about this. And,
right.
And
African spirit first, African family first. That's right. And I mean, it's a simple thing to actualize if you want to. One of the things that's interesting in listening to you, and I talked with my brother who really talks about Haiti and the same concept, and Cuba, is that they are, if you have black presence in these places, same thing here in the United States, but we just don't get it yet. That the black presence there in its origin is going to be diasporic. If you're dealing with black presence outside of the continent, in any place we are, you're not going to be able to trace that black origin in that space and not see that it has been a intermingling of a lot of different people from a lot of different parts of Africa. And I don't think we understand that we are diasporic outside of the continent by design. And so it's going to be essential for us to embrace that. Like becoming Cuban or Haitian or Bahamian or American is actually a negation of our origins, because these places come from us working together.
Right. I agree with you 110%, my brother, on that point. And I would even take it a step further. I know that one of the themes is the demonization of West African culture. And your outlook just now is one of the answers, in my opinion, to that whole thing, because we do not respect the diversity. We don't respect the ethnic mixtures. We don't respect it, because at the end of the day, while me and you, we have our solidarity as African brothers, you understand? We use it for solidarity, but at the end of the day, there's also can be a slight disadvantage that comes externally. Let me explain what I mean. So oftentimes when people talking about the transatlantic slave trade, we know the rhetoric, all the Africans enslaved other Africans and all of this stuff, right? And that's because this, like you said, the diversity, and we do not understand how we were a group of many and then became a group of one. You understand? So we don't understand these things. So then people take our present 21st century mindset, because of course me and you just black. You understand? And if me and you get in a fight, they'd be like, oh, look at that black on black crime. Look at them two black fellas fighting. You understand? But they don't understand that, first of all, Africa is more diverse than any part of Europe. You could take Nigeria alone. You understand? More diverse than any part of Europe. You could take the whole of Europe probably in terms of diversity and fit it in there. And so what they do is they take that 21st century mindset, look at the transatlantic slave trade. Oh, well, look at these black people enslaving each other. You understand? Completely missing the point. You understand? And these are things that we have to do. So while we have solidarity, and this is why our historical education is so important, these geopolitical spaces at the end of the day, even Haiti and Cuba at the end of the day, they were formed in us trying to do our survival. You understand? And in survival mode. Even all the nations in Africa today, with the exception of Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, you could argue, I guess, Liberia, but they were all drawn up during the scramble for Africa. You know, so these are things that are not acknowledged, that we do not know. When people talk about the greatest atrocities in the world, you can go on YouTube right now and you type in the top 10 evil people that ever lived, you will not see one slave master on that list.
Oh, wow, yep.
You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, and that's the truth. And then you type in most evil dictators in history, they will have someone like Idi Amin there. Mind you, Idi Amin was not, he was not a good leader, but it's absolutely ridiculous. You understand? And I don't know, I hope I ain't get you in trouble with this, my brother, but it's all about your perception. You understand? Because we could look at a terrorist attack in America that killed less than 3,000 people, and we could still ride on that for 15 years, but we don't question how many Muslims we kill in the in the Middle East. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Over 12 million.
And
how could you justify that?
Well, we know how they justify it. The question is how we justify allowing that negligence, allowing that dismissal of our lives. And that's really why we got to have this conversation. It's really one about worthiness. And it ties in. Let's go back a little bit, because, our central conversation is about the demonization of West African, and I'll say culture, religion, spirit. It's about the demonization of us as Africans, period, and the culture that we've produced. We talk a lot on this show about how that happens and still has happened and still happening here in the United States. Give us a sense of that flavor in the Bahamas. I mean, I know early on, like you were saying, like you all are seeing statues of people who by many ways are colonizers, imperialists, and slaveholders. I'm sure maybe your curriculum omits contributions of Africans. How does it walk us into the demonization process so that people can be aware of what that looks like as they're sending their children to school, or as we're going to churches and mosques and things of that nature that are designed based on this demonization?
I will use myself as an example, right? So I was born into a Christian family. I went to a school. My name is Christopher, and I went to a church named St. Christopher's, an Anglican church. And for those who don't know, the Anglican Church is the Church of England. Now, there's a sense in the Bahamas that the richer you get, the more Anglican you become. So you could be born in the ghetto and all this stuff, going to the Black Baptist, quote unquote, jumper church. But when you make a little bit of money and get a degree, you got to go to the Anglican Church. So this is the notion of it. Now, of course, when I grew up in this church, the priest, for the most of the time, was white. I went to school. This school is considered the most prominent school. And this school is called Queen's College, with an apostrophe S, by the way. So what they dealing with, right? This school used to be segregated up until about 1968. But they are still run by these old white oligarchs since that time. You understand? Most of my teachers in high school at this prominent school were white women and white men from Britain. These same white men and white women from Britain are the same one who gives us this loyalist rhetoric and this loyalist story. You understand? About how and the things that they teach us in school, they taught us things like blatantly slavery was easier in the Bahamas.
Wow.
I looked at the curriculum just last week, and at the end of our primary school curriculum, it says that the student must know the contributions that the loyalists made to the Bahamas. Wow. Before these people came from America, the ratio was one white person to one black person. Less than 50% of those blacks were enslaved, right? After that, you had over 90% of black people enslaved, and the ratio exceeded 8-1. You understand? So just by those simple little facts alone, is nothing. What could you possibly say to make us believe that for African people, the loyalist arrival was a good thing? You understand? This is that extreme indoctrination. Then, of course, when I go to church, the angel's white, Jesus white. And then when I ask him, I even remember asking a question. You know, this is how the indoctrination works. And then, of course, you be living in a society where it's cool to be Christian. You know, you could live anyway. And once you put up that Bible verse at the end of the week and you go to church and you pay your tithes, it's all good, right? Of course, we know African religion and tradition don't function like that. And it's almost like this concerted, constant effort to keep African people in the Bahamas outside of their cultural incubator. You following me? Hello? Hello?
Hello, we're here.
Me?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Yeah, all right. So outside of their cultural incubator. And so growing up, we always got these versions of the story, told that, Christopher Columbus was never, how could you learn about Christopher Columbus and not hear the word genocide? You understand? Right. And my indoctrination was so serious. I will never forget this, and this is one of the shames of my life. We had a mock trial of Christopher Columbus when I was in grade 9. A mock trial.
Wow.
I chose actually an excellent lesson plan.
It really is. When I heard it, I'm like, man, because, that needs to happen. That's powerful.
But little 14-year-old altar boy, Christopher Davis, understand, going to Queen's College, I chose to defend Christopher Columbus. And what do you think my argument was? Oh, if it wasn't for Christopher Columbus, we would be up in Africa, similar to what those U.S. senators say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but brother Chris, we have to own that. I had this conversation with people around Christopher Columbus Day moving into Thanksgiving. Like, I grew up in the church. And even recently, I've heard people say,
me too,
that they're thankful for slavery, and they're thankful for Columbus, and they're thankful for whatever atrocity we've gone through, because it was the way we got to know Jesus. When you hear that, man, that hurts you to your soul. I remember growing up as a little boy hearing that from very prominent pastors and preachers. I remember Andre Crouch says something very similar. So, one of the things we need to know, I remember hearing that the United States was one of the easiest places for slavery, and that we were the happy slaves, right? So to hear that this is the message that's going on throughout the diaspora is one of the reasons that we need to have this conversation.
Oh, for sure, my brother. You understand? And as the late Dr. Clark said, that is just the genius of white supremacy, the evil genius, I should say, of white supremacy, And in this mock trial, I defended Christopher Columbus, as I was saying, so this indoctrination is extreme. You understand? We have many people, we have serious hang-ups on colorism here. We have many women that bleach their skins. It's normalized.
Wow.
Normalized. We have young high school girls who are sent home for wearing afros at school.
Wow, it sounds like we living in the same country, man. I mean, like, we have similar stuff going on right here, right now in 2020 in the United States.
Exactly, my brother, But the difference being is you would expect it in the United States, but you wouldn't expect it in the Bahamas, who is 95% black.
Right, exactly.
You follow me?
Yep.
So, and the Bahamas, as I was saying, this goes back to my original statement about us also being the vanguard of neocolonialism. The British, as well as Barbados and Bermuda, they always put us up on this pedestal as the model colony. And when we were having our parallel revolutionary movements, our movements to majority rule and trying to break out of the colonial system up to independence, you understand? There was this moment where we could have pushed through and we just kind of failed, So if you look at a place, for example, like Trinidad and Tobago, they're a republic. We still have people here in the Bahamas who say things like, oh, well, our black leaders are too corrupt. Maybe we should go back and be a British colony.
That's
right. You have people that say, I don't even know where to begin, my brother. We have a character, for example, in the Bahamas, right? I could talk to you about this for 2 weeks straight. We have a character in the Bahamas. His name is Stafford Sands. Google him. Stafford Sands, right? Stafford Sands, he is considered a Bahamian hero, and he's considered the father of tourism in the Bahamas, our number one industry. And we have mostly black historians, actually. They will do the most mental gymnastics,
right,
just to include him in the story. Now, this man was a Nazi sympathizer. His mentor was a man named Heinemann Schatz, Hitler's minister of economics, right? This man, and people, because he cheated on his wife all the time with our beautiful black sisters right there over the hill. And people actually try to use that to justify and say that he was not racist. You understand? This guy was the worst of the worst of the influence, the richest guy in this country during our equivalent of the Jim Crow era.
Right.
You understand? So this is our Robert E. Lee. You understand? This is him, this guy. Now, in 1967, we won something called majority rule. Not independence, majority rule.
Right.
Just means that the black man and the white man have the same amount of votes. And the election was split. And the black party won that, the Progressive Liberal Party, the black party, they won it by 1 seat. Stafford Sands packed up all his money and left the country and say he don't want to be in a country run by monkeys.
Right.
So let's pretend, right? Let's just pretend that he was an honorable man and he was not racist, right? Let's just pretend for one moment. How can you make a man a national hero of a country that he defected from? Answer me that, my brother.
There is no answer if you're thinking in your right mind. So,
how can you make a man a national hero of a country he defected from? And this, the majority of the population, it is absolutely incredible. And you have people who, they call him the father of tourism. So the major reason why tourism is so strong in the Bahamas is because of the Cuban Revolution, nothing else.
Wow.
And they give all credit. You understand? Like, yeah.
Well, I think that we're gonna
sometimes, man. You know, so sometimes
so we come up on another commercial break. One of the things I want to do when we come back in our final segment, I really want to come back to one of the things that's important to me is for us as black people, wherever we are, to really come face to face with how our spiritual systems, our religions have been demonized, and how even today we hold on to that demonization. I know, like here in the States, it's probably most demonized through voodoo. Like if you say the word voodoo here, people start shuddering. You know, they literally think you're worshiping the devil. And you know, so the Orisha thing, you know, they might shake a little bit. You know, you talk about Netzer, or you might talk about, you know, whatever else, Abasom. You know, they're going to shudder a little bit. But mostly what happens with that is they don't really know what you're talking about. They just know you're not talking about Christ and angels or whatever. So they don't get scared, but they hear the word voodoo, and you can literally see people like back up from you, like you're about to get struck by lightning. So I'm wondering what this demonization around African spiritual systems looks like and feels like in a country where you have just said that most people know they go back to the root when they want to heal themselves. So how do they make sense of that and at the same time demonize the West African culture that is so much a part of that process? I'm talking with my brother Chris Behanzin Davis. He's a Bahamian historian, interpreter, and activist, and we're having a segment that we call Groundings with Our Brother. Normally, I would invite our listening audience to chime in, but our phone lines are down, so it's just two brothers talking, and hopefully we're having a conversation that everybody gets to benefit from. So stay tuned.
You're listening to The Shamari Show, hosted by Brother Shamari on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD, Black Talk Media.
And welcome back to our conversation with my brother Chris Davis out of the Bahamas. And when we went to commercial break, I was asking my brother, we've been talking about demonization. We talked a lot about some historical figures, but I really want to spend this last segment together talking about something that I know I see here. I feel it myself sometimes. I like this idea that how we practice spiritualism and religion before we became victims of the Ma'afa has somehow been turned into demon worship and taboo. Like we as black people are scared of the very source of our spirit, which ironically is the source of the three major religions we are now captive by, right? Christianity, Islam, Judaism in some form. They all owe their origin to African spiritual systems, and yet we are scared of those systems that we have a genetic cultural tie to. I know how that looks here in the United States. Give us a sense of what that demonization looks like and feels like in the Bahamas.
As a matter of this may shock But I think that organization is actually stronger in Bahamas. Because in America, though the stigma may be there, you can still practice your religion. You will just be shunned for it. In the Bahamas, if you practice certain aspects of West African religion, you will be thrown in jail. Okay? Hello?
Wow.
Break up. Yeah. Okay. Now, to elaborate, you understand? So we have many, many authors from the Bahamas. Probably the most written about topic is bush medicine, what we refer to as bush medicine. But using your herbs and your plants and your spices and this part of the animal to heal yourself of all ailments, right? So we've had people doctors who have written books on bush medicine. And in every single book about bush medicine in the Bahamas, there's a disclaimer in the introduction where they tell you blatant lies, and they say that bush medicine has nothing to do with voodoo and obia and all this demon worship and all of that stuff. It has to do with the stigma. And then what people don't realize is, particularly during the Ma'afa, you were executed on the spot for these things. You understand? People don't understand the level of indoctrination. Mm-hmm. We have to also look at the appropriation of religion, particularly during the Renaissance period. You understand? Because if you grow up and all the angels are white and all the devils red or black, you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So
let's do something before we move on from that, because you're making a very important point that I don't think we delve into enough. We talk about it here.
Let me just close this one out first. So there's a term called cognitive dissonance here in the Bahamas, where we do these things, we know why we're doing it, and it's denial, because you wouldn't see these people writing books about bush medicine if it didn't have anything to do with African religion and voodoo and all these things. It would not even be mentioned. You following me?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So what you saying, brother? Sorry.
No,
the connection is
our connection. Yeah. But we're gonna work it out. We're gonna work it out. But one of the things I want you to go back. We talk a lot here in the States about the banning of the drum, and we'll talk about it as a means of communication. We'll talk about all of the different reasons why the drum was banned. But I don't think we talk enough about one of the major reasons that the drum was banned, because the drum and the dance is the way we call down spirit and worship in our traditions. Talk a little bit about that, because we even when we acknowledge it, we don't really go all the way and understand that this culture banned our practice of African spiritual systems. That's really what it boiled down to. When you're talking about reading, when you're talking about drumming, you're talking about the way that we invoked our spirits on our own terms and on our behalf. And this culture did a frontal assault against that. The fact that that's still illegal in the Bahamas, I'm stunned by. But let's stay in this space a little bit more, because I don't think our people appreciate how powerful it is that we have given up our spiritual breath. I mean, spirit means to breathe into, and we've given up the thing that was breathed into us. And I don't know that we can really reconnect with our ancestors and with our culture if we don't reconnect with that breath.
I 100% agree, brother. Well, with the drum in the United States, you could make the parallel with an instrument called the gyambi in my homestead in Kid Island. And the reason they banned the gyambi in Kid Island, for the exact same reason they banned the drum in the United States. The erroneous claim was, it turned these African savages put them into a frenzy. You understand what I'm saying? Now, if you remember, speaking from my perspective, if you remember where many of these people came from, they, particularly in the Bahamas, we have a very strong Yoruba contingent, right? Now that gyambi that was used is the scraper, and we have a version of music called rake and scrape. And that gyambi was banned because they said it sent Africans into a frenzy. But that musical instrument, what is a musical instrument for others, as you alluded to just now, is so much more for us. Now that gyambi actually is the instrument of the god of fire and justice and lightning, my daddy, Shango. You follow?
Right.
Right. Now, Shango, if you see him, he will invoke fair and Europeans. It's the man, Shango. These are the spirits that were invoked in Trinidad for their revolts. Ogun is the spirit that, you understand, and we just so out of it. But in my historical interpretation, I like to simplify things. And for your listening audience, anybody who may feel that they have these stigmas, if you feel that West African religion and any form of West African custom is innately evil in some way, just remember this very important point. And this is a blanket statement, but it's true. One side was doing all the enslaving. One side was doing all the raping. One side was doing all the pillaging. And one side was not. Which side was doing? The Christian side was doing all the raping and pillaging, and the people who we claim to be evil voodoo practitioners were the victims of the actions of these so-called Christians, right? And furthermore, what we don't even know, one of the first places that Europeans went to get people for the transatlantic slave trade was the Kingdom of Congo with King Alfonso I. The Kingdom of Congo and Alfonso I, they converted to Christianity before many Europeans did. You understand? And that's West Africa. You understand what I'm saying? And then after the fact, he started to write letters to the Portuguese about them taking even their own Christian converted African as slaves into the Western Hemisphere. These are tough pills for people to swallow. And another huge problem, I think the biggest hindrance, even though you may hear the passion in my voice, I'm actually coming with compassion. Because in my view, one of the biggest hindrances to us breaking out of this mentality is actually our love for our mothers, our grandmothers, our fathers, our grandfathers. Because for me, initially, as I was coming out of this, let's say, mental slavery, so to speak, just to use the term, right?
Right.
What do you think? Say, oh, well, my mother taught me this. My grandmother taught me this.
That's
you know? So oftentimes in the Bahamas, when I try to, invoke certain attitudes and invoke this black pride, I often get people say, in typical Gullah terms, so I should go against everything my grandmother taught me.
Exactly.
You understand?
They do it. They do it with us with voting. If you don't vote, you're dishonoring your ancestors. If you do this, I call it sentimental slavery. By the way, we are enslaved to sentiment, and we really are going to have to really break that bondage.
Yeah, I can be using that one, brother. Sentimental slavery. But that is what it is, bro. And it's a genuine love, and it's this genuine family union. Even through the Ma'afa, there are still so many beautiful things about us as African people, and we have to take this different philosophical approach to looking even at ourselves. You understand? And these are some of the things that we're talking about. So again, us saying that you should respect African culture, West African culture, and voodoo, by the way, is born in the homie. You understand? So if you have a problem with voodoo, don't watch Black Panther. Because the women doing the fight in Black Panther are Dahomey Mino. And the Dahomey Mino was the ones who taught John Jacques Dessalines about warfare. The late, great Victoria Montu. You will hear about Dessalines, but you won't hear about his godmother. And she was a Dahomey Mino general. Female general from the homie, and Dessalines is the one who win the war. You understand?
Oh yeah.
So if you so hung up on these things, I could get deep on you.
Well, we just want to do a little teaser.
Don't put time in. You see what I'm saying? This is a part of us, my brother. The reason why women move their waist in that way is because these are all based on fertility dances. Even something that may seem grotesque as twerking, you could find something beautifully African within it. It's just perverse because we still on this ongoing ma'afa. You understand me, brother?
I'm understanding you totally. One of the things I want to do before I let you go is with us or ancestors, it doesn't matter. If you were to name 3 to 5 historical figures that you think our people need to read or study that really was centered around their work, centered around the creation or the reconnection of the diaspora. So I really want you to kind of offer some people who you think people would benefit from studying, who really were dedicated to the reconnection, the building, the bridging across the African diaspora.
You put me on the spot right now because you and I both know that pantheon is so great, but I'll do my best. So let's make it 5, right?
Okay, I'll give you 5, no more than 5.
And I will include two sisters in there, just so, because we do things. We Africans do things. So one of my personal favorites, and he's very popular, Dr. John Henry Clark. I put him in there. Just get his collected writings, anything he wrote. And as a matter of fact, his most powerful things are his lectures on YouTube. It's literally like you sitting in your grandfather's lap, be in school, when you're listening to his lecture, right? Also, Ivan van Sertima. Van Sertima is, he wrote the book, They Came Before Columbus, Blacks in Science. You understand?
Yeah.
Any man who looking to court a serious female, you send her a book called Black Women in Antiquity, written by Ivan van Sertima.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Right, so that my whole historical interpretive thing, I pretty much learned from him, where you could have the facts, but you got to breathe a certain life into these facts. You understand? Mm-hmm. Now, going to a sister now, she's still around, Baina Bello.
Oh yeah, we just had her in town last month.
She's the last one. What? You all had her in town? Hey, that's one of my personal
she has a new book out, Sheroes of the Haitian Revolution. So she was touring promoting her book.
Yeah, I got a really copy of that. But yeah, so she's another one I would put out there, and she really brings it into context with the West African spirituality thing, right? You also have, this way I could choose one more man, but this way I get difficult. But I would say personally, I love Dr. Ben Joseph Yorkinen.
Okay.
You understand? He is another one, but for the general public and the listening audience, I will select either one or two, either Walter Rodney or Eric Williams. Eric Williams being the first Prime Minister of Trinidad.
Yeah.
So the book called Capitalism and Slavery. If you read Capitalism and Slavery, that pretty much kills the reparations argument. It lets you know what we did to contribute to these things, right? And all these things. And I will also suggest Dr. Cressling.
Oh, Francis Cress Welsing. Okay.
Yeah, right. So I'd also suggest her as well. But as we mentioned, it's too many. You understand what I'm saying? I'm gonna
ask everybody, for their five. I'm interested in the overlap, but I'm also interested in where new names come up that I might not be familiar with or might not have known. So you're kicking us off, but I'm going to ask everybody, for their five or so, because sometimes many of our people are hearing stuff like this for the first time. And then, they want to go back and they want to read and see for themselves. And I respect that. So I want to make sure that we're giving them breadcrumbs that they can go back and follow and study and come to their own interpretations about how important the idea of grounding is. To me, it's essential. I'm appreciative of a lot of our historical writers, but one of the persons, man, who writes from what people might call a nonfiction perspective that for me centers me is Aikwe Arma. His writings, 2000 Seasons, The Healers, he just has a list of writings, but he writes more what people would call fiction, but his fiction is historically grounded, and it speaks to me in a particular way that really lets me know that this is a path that we need to undertake.
So it's similar to like the Book of Negroes, whereas historical fiction is something that would have typically happened, or even the New Root series. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I haven't seen that yet. Yeah. I mean, it like I start with 2000 Seasons. The one that's speaking to me now is The Healers, though, because it's really about our need to remember. This idea that we don't really understand what we don't even know and what we've forgotten as a result of the Ma'afa, and that we have to remember that this has been a historical onslaught. It's going to take some real dedicated intentionality for us to reach back and regain our sense of sovereignty as an African descended people. That's what's been taken from us, and that's what we're going to have to fight to resurrect.
Right. A big part of it, too, of course, is the typical portrayal of Africa, right? So, for example, you watch National Geographic, you turn on National Geographic. They love to focus on, the Khoisan people. They love to focus on the Dogon, right? The Dogon is a group from the Kingdom of Mali. They're known for their extravagant masks and they're really cool dances. You know, that's the only thing that these anthropologists will focus on.
Right.
And they will just show you them dancing. Oh, look at this. This is a 1,000-year-old dance of the so and so and the such and such. What they won't tell you is those dances are actually reenactment of astronomical movements in the stars.
There you go.
And that this Dogon tribe, right, and they would never show you it on TV. And this same Dogon tribe, I mean, they make NASA look like amateurs.
I hear you.
NASA, right?
And again, going back to those dances also being sacred and spiritual, because our spiritual systems were our science systems. That's what we don't understand. It's the same conversation.
All was what science, religion, dancing, singing, all of these was interconnected and one and the same. And of course, they would take their camera there, and then they would show you the Dogon, and they would just dance around, you know. And so for the listening audience, you just have to, like I say, we have to take a different philosophical approach to ourselves, because that's what it really is. It's ourselves. You understand? You have to think about it like this. If somebody came and they took over America, you know, they would take New York, they would take Washington, but then you will have one little family in some little backwater town that survives. And then after 200 years, with that family surviving in isolation, they now have to regress to the old way. So I hope I don't offend anybody, but let's say, hypothetically speaking, you know, if you have like 6 families in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that survived this Holocaust that happened in America. And then 200 years later, these aliens go there with their camera, and all they show you is these 6 families in Baton Rouge now eating crocodiles and alligators. With no and this is exactly what they do to Africa, my brother. You understand me?
Right.
This is exactly what they do to us all the time. You know, and they show the Khoisan, you know, and they call them a nomadic tribe. They call the Herero a nomadic tribe. And these people were displaced by the Germans.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's Namibia. You understand what I'm saying? And this is where they formulated their techniques for what was to come later in the Holocaust.
Right.
You understand?
And that's what happens when we let people control our story. And Brother Chris, that's why we got to work hard to recontrol our narrative, to tell our story on our terms. And that's what we're going to do here with Groundings on the Shamari Show. My brother, sorry we had to bring this to a close, but I look forward to future conversations with you. And I definitely look forward to reaching back to you. I want to establish a personal connection to just talk with you. And we can talk about how we bring this dialogue powerfully forward.
You've been listening to Word Radio On Demand. Listen live to Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live at wordradio.com.